a couple of things. How was career fair? Was it good? Did you guys learn a lot? Did you meet some people? Okay, anybody get a job? Thanks. Anybody get a job? No. All right, wait. That was the whole point. Interviews? Okay, that's good. All right. How about some internships? Did you learn about those? You guys are still in that realm, right? How many of you are thinking about studying someplace else, like someplace internationally during your remaining career? Anybody? Where are you thinking about going? But you're looking at that. Because the school has developed a lot of really cool opportunities for you. So I would encourage you to look into those. And look, you don't have to go just with our school. You can go do these programs with any school in the country. Just be sure that it's vetted carefully and that it's safe where you're going, right? That's a key. A lot of people don't realize how many people, students in particular, go to these study abroad programs and some very safety and security challenges occur. So just be careful, right? Just be prudent. You guys are smart people. Yeah. All right, so what else? What did you like about career fair?
It was a great networking opportunity.
It was good networking? All right. What else? Who went to the lunch?
No.
You went to the lunch?
I tried.
Cindy, you didn't go? Anybody else go? So there was a young man speaking. Was it Van? How did all the speakers do?
Oh, they did good.
Good. Who was the keynote speaker for the lunch? Do you remember? Does anybody know? Yeah? From? Oh, okay. Of the American Hotel Lodging Association or AHOA, the Asian American Hotel Lodging Association. Okay. Yeah, good. All right. And he or she did a good job? She? Oh, good. What'd you learn?
She talked a lot about the process of where she grew up and how she became a hotelier and stuff, and her pathway. So it was interesting.
A very good role model. And that's impressive that you remember all that. Good for you. You were listening. That's good. All right. Well, good. I'm glad that went well. I'm glad you learned a lot. And so that's great. I heard great things about it from the other faculty, so that's good. Now, I want you to get into your groups in just 1 second. It looks like you're already there, but I want to have a little conversation with you. This chapter 6 is about what? Well, before you take that step, I'm really pleased you said that. But before we get there, broadly, this chapter is about what? Chapter 6 is about property. It's about real property, it's about leasing, and it's about intellectual property. And you're going to write your midterm paper on intellectual property issues. So I give you a scenario, and I'm wading through your posts last night, and maybe a couple of you mentioned the potential infringement on intellectual property rights. So a couple of things come to my mind. Either we didn't read the chapter, or we're not connecting the dots. I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt and assume we're not connecting the dots. A couple of you did, but really not many. So I bring this up not to be critical, but to share with you that when you come across a situation, you need to think critically. You need to ask yourself, what's the relevance of this to what I'm reading? Or what is the relevance of what I'm reading to this fact situation? Right? We're talking about property in this chapter. How does this fact scenario relate to that? Right? Many of you immediately went into your event mode and created food and beverage and organization, and all that's good. I'm glad to see you doing that, and you thought through a lot of good things. That was good. I just need you to go further. So when you get into your groups, let's be clear. I'm not looking for the organizational structure of the event. I want to know, and I want you to focus just on this. What do you need to do to obtain the broadcast rights? Who would you go to? If you charge money, does that make a difference? Right? Those are the questions that I want you to look into. And I want you to be curious. Don't just look at the limited information in the textbook. You've got this entire world out there that will teach you about IP. What's IP? And it's crucial today, as we learned when we talked about management agreements. But every one of you is going to be involved at some point in a business that has to deal with licensing of intellectual property. You okay? Good. Okay. So let's talk broadly about IP real quickly. We learned about databases and proprietary information. By the way, if you sign a non-compete and you agree to keep information private, is that a valid contract? Say yes. So you guys are going to be asked to sign these things. You need to understand what they mean. And you can't just quit a company and go to work for a competitor without potentially violating the non-compete. You have to realize that these things matter. So you need to read them before you sign them. You need to be okay with them. And you need to honor them. Or go get a lawyer that says you don't. But don't go do anything until you get an opinion that tells you what you can do and can't do. You good with that? Now, back to the licensing. What do we use in our business particularly that we need to get a license for? And you know what? It dawned on me when I was reading through your things. I was like, wait, nobody's getting this. And I went, snap. You guys grew up with free music, didn't you? Or allegedly free music. Right? Because you guys were ripping it off every day on the internet. You were finding free music. And you guys hate to pay for music, don't you? You hate it. That's what went through my mind. So we got to have a conversation around that because you have to pay to use people's intellectual property. I didn't get it either until I wrote a book. Then I'm like, you stole my book? What? What's wrong with you? It took me 3 years to do that. How could you do that? Right? And I was like, and then I went, well, maybe I should have thought more about that when I was growing up. Yeah? So I'm sharing this with you. You write a song. Look, if you don't think you should pay for music, then you go write a song. Right? Yeah. I mean, if you don't think you should pay for a book, go write it. If you don't think you should pay the NFL for the Super Bowl broadcast and you're going to make money off it, go play football. Start your own league. But a lot of money and time and investment goes into this, and a lot of thinking and a lot of risk and opportunity costs. Man, these songwriters could be doing all kinds of other things than devoting their time to writing music. So you owe that to them. Now, having said that, the licensing process of music and broadcast rights is messed up. I will be the first to come to the table about that. I don't like it. I wish it were different. But think of the alternative. Well, wait. Do you guys know how it works? I should ask that first. I'm sorry. Let's stay with music because it's a little more definitive. How does music licensing work? Did you read the book? Yeah, Cindy, save them.
Like in the chapter, it said if you're gonna put like a party, in other words, use their music, you have to get a copy, permission from that person, from the individual that you're gonna use their music.
That's right.
It doesn't get.
So could you imagine if you had a bar and you were going to spin 300 records or songs that night? you would have to go to every individual artist and get their permission or negotiate a fee with them, right? Except we don't have to do that now. Why not? Now we have licensing companies that have gone out and kind of collectively aggregated so many artists, the writers, the performers, right, that are due a royalty. So they're called ASCAP, ASCAP, the American Society of Composers and Producers. It's called CSAC, which I have no idea what that stands for. It's called BMI. And then there's a new one on the scene called the Global Music Registry, GMR. They've come about since digital music. What totally changed the music landscape forever? Remember we talked about the exponential progression of technology? They stopped selling CDs, or what we used to call albums, and they sell one song. Who did that? iTunes started it. Right now, well, once iTunes started, then you've got Spotify and Amazon Music and everybody else. But that changed the whole world, because you guys could stop paying for songs you didn't want to listen to. Right? Because that was the model we had. And that's the key today. You've got to break the model. You've got to disrupt. So it's interesting that happened. But now you're not licensing an album. Now you're licensing a song, right? When a DJ comes to play, do they need to be licensed? Well, either they need to be licensed or the venue that they're playing at needs to be licensed. Right? And you get licensed by paying a fee to ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, and now GMR, Global Music Registry. Yeah, but you've got to recognize that, because here's what's going to happen one day. You're going to open a restaurant or a bar, nightclub, and you're going to be bumping along, and you're going to be open for 18 months, and you're going to have a DJ spinning, or you're going to have some live music going on 2 or 3 days a week, and somebody's going to walk in and go, man, this is a cool place. And you're going to go, thank you. You go, how many seats you got here? You must have 600 seats in here. He goes, yeah, we've actually got 550. Oh, that's good. And you're open 7 days a week? Yeah. Lunch and dinner? Oh, yeah. You play music throughout all that time? Oh, yeah. Oh, great. I'm going to bring my friends. Terrific. And then you get a letter in the mail about 2 days later. And it's from BMI. And it says, based upon what you told me last week, you owe us this amount of money going forward. But, oh, yeah, for the last 18 months, you owe us $18,000 or whatever it is, because you weren't paying to use the music. Now, you can get around that if you want to use a home stereo system that's not commercially oriented, right? And you're just playing the radio. You can get around it if you're small. There's some exemptions in the law for that. And you can get around it by buying something like Muzak, where you pay the license up front. But you can't pay Muzak and then have a person playing the guitar and playing Beatles songs or Rolling Stone. Well, those remind me. What do you guys play? Post. What's the guy's name? There you go. You can't have somebody playing Post Malone. You can't do that. You just can't. You got to pay. And people try to get away with it. Man, these people are getting aggressive. And now venture capital people are getting into these licensing groups, and they're going to be aggressive and assertive. So I would not be doing my job if I didn't get you guys to understand that this is a big part of your business, and you need to get it, right? You got it? So you need to read it. And the whole idea behind this paper that you're going to be writing next is around intellectual property rights, because it's become absolutely crucial that you have an understanding of it. Plus, you want to protect your own IP. If you go on Instagram and you're a photographer and you create great pictures and all of a sudden somebody takes those pictures and starts selling them, are you going to be okay with that? All right, then. There's an ethical component. There's also a legal component. All right. So I'm going to ask Stephanie, because I happen to read her note, and she mentioned the NFL licensing piece. So how did you come? Is it because you guys have been through that at Pappas, or you? There you go. Okay, well, I appreciate that. So just explain to everybody what your first step would have been, just so that the teams can be on the same page.
I
that stuff. Interesting. I have a sister-in-law that has a farm, and she raises animals. And I've learned that when she names a cow, like she'll name them like Tenderloin. That's not a good sign. I feel bad for them. I'm like, oh my God, I need to go kidnap the cow, save it from its fate. It was the first time I figured that out. I was like, what? I said, oh, that's a cute name. And my brother looked at me and said, dude. I went, oh no! I'm eating. I'm like, oh my God, this is bad. Okay, anyway, where was I? ADA papers, that's where I was. Let's pass them in. Are we going to finally get warm weather? It's kind of feeling like spring. Birds are chirping. Things are happening. Did you guys see that jet that crashed outside of Houston? From Amazon.
There were 3 people in the board, but they only found 2 bodies.
Right. Right. Oh, this is exciting. Okay. All right. Now, before we get to, I'm looking forward to reading your team memos. Thank you for doing that. Thank you. Spencer is putting together your teams right now for your midterm paper that will be assigned on Thursday. Okay? So this evening, you don't have a post. So I would encourage you to look at the assignment, to start spending a little time with it, and I want you to locate your teammate. So it'll be posted. Spencer, you'll have a link where you can find who your teammate is. And if you don't know who they are when you come into class on Thursday morning, everybody put your name tags up very quickly, and everybody locate your teammate, right? And if you need help with that on Thursday, I will help you. Littlematch.com. But I want you guys to have your teams established by Thursday. Okay? This is a big paper. It's an intense paper. It takes some time and some effort. You also have to use a collaborative technique. How many of you, I don't think we've talked about it in there, but from leadership, you remember how to do a collaborative technique with word track changes? Have we talked about that? Everybody kind of have a feel for that? All right, it sounds like at least half the class. If you end up with a team that doesn't understand track changes, come see me or get with somebody in the class that does, so I can be sure before you leave this class, I want you to know how to collaborate with some digital tools, okay? All right, so we'll talk more about that on Thursday. We wanted to make you aware of the team thing. Let's talk about your ADA. I know we're going to come back to property in just a moment. But talk to me about the Americans with Disabilities Act. What did you learn? Do you now have more empathy for people with disabilities? Okay, what was the thing where you went, oh, wow, I didn't know that, or aha, or something? What did you learn? Don't everybody speak at once. Gunnar.
Just like little minor inconveniences, like the restaurant I went to, they had proper signs for slight adjust in elevation, but it didn't seem natural. I could see someone with a wheelchair or crutches would just either fly or trip easily, even though it's.
Did you say fly?
You know,
yeah, I know.
It's a slight incline, so just
Yeah, it makes a difference, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Makes a big difference. And here's the thing. Do you just sit and wait for those things to happen? What do you need to be doing? Active, proactive inspection. That's part of what this book is all about. Part of what this class hopefully is all about is preventing these things from happening in the first place, right? It shouldn't take an accident for us to wake up and realize something's not right. Yeah? Especially if you walk by these things every single day. You've got to be curious about things and recognize perils or challenges when you see them. Somebody else had their hand up. Was it Natalie? Raven? Raven.
Yeah, the restaurant that I went to in the bathrooms, the sink was really high, and also the soap dispenser was just standing up.
Mhm.
Like I'm 5'7", and the soap dispenser was like right, like it stopped like
Yeah.
at my eyes or whatever. So it was kind of high in general. And I was like, somebody in a wheelchair could never reach.
Never reach it, right? Did you learn about why so much space is necessary in a bathroom, right? Very important. Yes, ma'am. Somebody had their hand up.
I went to Chili's and I had to fight with the door just to get in.
Just you did, and you're strong. Yeah, exactly.
I almost died.
So doors can be heavy these days, can't they? Yeah. Yes, sir.
I went to this diner out in Katy, and there's like so many old people over there. So like a lot of people.
Careful, dude. All right.
Have people too. So it was like I actually got to like see the actual handicapped people like using like the doorways and like moving around the restaurant. So I kind of got to see it all in action. So that was kind of cool that like I wasn't just doing an inspection like looking at it kind of blindly. I was actually seeing it like actually happen in front of me. So yeah, I mean I kind of noticed things I would have normally noticed because they're actually using the doors and going like walking through like the tables and everything. So it's kind
Yeah. And look, here's the thing. When you think about people with disabilities, you can't just think people using wheelchairs or a walker. You have to think about people that have a hearing impairment. Or you have to think about people that have trouble seeing. You have to think about that. And today, his point is well taken. Look, people with disabilities through an accident or birth, that's kind of one classification of people. But as people age and people are living longer, they are losing their mobility. So you're going to have this, it's already a pretty significant target market. But just think if those people weren't in the restaurant, it would have probably been half empty, right? So you've got to think that this is a target-rich environment because a lot of people have money. There are hotels that have been for 20 years just catering for people with disabilities. And so you've got to realize there's an empathic reason to do it, but also a financial reason to do it as well. Camille, you have a thought?
Yeah, so I went to a coffee shop and the sign, like there, you can see like from the bottom of the stairs, you can climb the stairs to get to the front door. And there's like a little like symbol that had like the handicap accessible. There were like words underneath it. If I stay at the bottom, I couldn't read what was on it.
Yeah.
And then there was no handicap accessible entrance from the front. But when I got to the top of the stairs, the sign said, go to the front, or like, please ask us about our handicap accessible entrance. And like, if you're in a wheelchair, you can't get.
How you going to do that?
Yeah, and then it was, or actually like around the back, so you had to like go through the parking lot. Like the parking lot didn't have, like it had one handicap spot, but there was like a large enough pathway, and it wasn't like clearly marked anywhere else. They had to like ask to like get to it. So it was just like there were handicap tables inside, but it was pretty clear that probably no one in a wheelchair or on crutches could ever make it.
Get in. And so did you realize from reading and from doing the thing that you have to do this kind of what we say sequentially? What's the priority? The first priority? The entrance, right? Getting them in the getting people with disabilities in the parking lot. That's why we spend so much time on parking lots. And that's why the tickets are so expensive if people park there that are not authorized to park there. So don't park there. Yeah? Then what do? Then we get them in where? In the door. Right? Somebody failed that test, in your opinion. Yeah? Because it's just like Camille just said, and you said, if you can't get them in the door, it doesn't matter what else you do. If they can't get in the parking lot, it doesn't matter what the door does. So you have to prioritize these things. And just as Gunnar pointed out, if they get out of the parking lot and the ramp has a lip or the slope is not technically correct, then it doesn't matter what else you've done inside. It doesn't matter if your bathrooms are disabled friendly, right? None of that matters because you're not getting that. So the law is very, very specific and clear. You have to prioritize access. Then once you get them inside, make sure your aisles are wide enough. Make sure that your bathrooms are available. Now, does every single restaurant and hotel or country club, do they have to do all of this? All right. If they're new, the answer is yes. If they've been in existence before the law, if the building was in existence before the law was passed in 19... 91, and then it went into effect in 92. So that means it's been in law for a long time.
There was another revision in 2010.
There was. And where did you find a lot of places that still did not comply? Even though the law has been in place for, what's that, 2017? Yeah, a long time. 26 years? 26 years, right? 27 years? 26 years? 20, give or take a year. Thank you. But the law also was very helpful. It was very clear to businesses. It's subjective, and that means that it doesn't say, if you've been in existence before this, you don't have to do all of this at one time. If you do a renovation, you have to bring it up to code. But if you don't, you just have to make the changes that you can afford to make. And that's a subjective law that we rarely see, but it was written that way, and it actually has saved a lot of people, but it also creates challenges for people with disabilities to get into all the places they want to go. And that's the goal behind the law. We believe in this country in equality, right? That's one of our fundamental platforms. Well, it doesn't just mean equality for people that have mobility, or that can see, or that can hear. It's equality for everyone. And so we're trying to break down the barriers to access for people and make sure it's safe for them. And you've got to think. One day, this is about 20 years ago, I was at the front desk of the hotel, and we were hosting we used to have a circular spiral staircase in the middle of the hotel lobby. You guys, it was before you were born. No, seriously, it was before you were born. Something like that. Anyway, it was a circular staircase, and it was made out of concrete. And it was literally right in the middle of the lobby. And I was standing at the desk, and the front desk person, who I think was a student actually, which is okay. I'm not being critical because they just didn't get it. But a person that used a cane that couldn't see, he was blind, and they used a cane for guidance, said, hey, I'm going to a certain event, and I need to get to the room. And the person behind the desk goes, just walk straight across the lobby, right? And you're going to run right into it. And I thought, run right into it. That may not be the best language, because you've got this concrete thing that hung down about, but if you were more than 5'5", you were going to hit it. And I'm watching this person go down the thing, and I thought, wait! wait. Yeah, well, finally, we got everybody to put some plants there, right? Planters, so the cane would hit the planters. But my point is, you just got to think. You've got to be careful. You can't just treat everybody the same. You have to realize that some people need accommodations that others don't. And that's why we're in this business, because we should be able to recognize those differences. Is that a fair expectation? All right, so keep that in mind. Now, continue to break down the barriers to access. This isn't just about people in wheelchairs. Remember that. You have to remember that. You have to realize that it's accommodating other people. Cindy mentioned the change in the law. Let's talk about animals that people use as guide animals, right? How many of you have seen somebody with an animal that you thought could not help anybody for any reason? Okay, so it's been abused. Now, the law was changed in 2010 to help a lot. So before 2010, people were walking into hotels with pet snakes and hamsters and going, this is my guide animal. And the hotel business was calling me going, what do I do? Hey, man, yeah, I'm not sure. Let them in. The laws changed. Camille, will you write down notice, N-O-T-I-C-E, please? So they passed the law that said now it's only dogs or miniature horses. Why miniature horses? They live longer, so you get a return on your investment. Sounds kind of greedy, but it takes a lot of money to train a dog or to train a horse. It's cheaper to actually train the horse. They live longer, so you get a better ROI on the training. That's exactly right. And they're tiny little horses. They should make cartoons out of them. They're really cute. They're tiny. But I speak to the industry over, and I've had one innkeeper tell me they've had a horse come their way. I said, what'd you do? I said, let him in. I said, well, that was the right thing to do. Now, the animal has to be qualified. So you need to understand this. In order for an animal to be qualified, a dog or the horse to be qualified under the ADA, it must deliver an assistance for a major life activity. It must help them see. It must help them hear. It must alert them to take their medicine. It must alert them if there's an emergency. Do you see that? Comfort and emotional support is not a qualification under the Americans with Disabilities Act. There is also no such thing as a certificate or a vest that denotes that a dog is a qualified service animal under the ADA. That does not exist. People will tell you they do. They'll dress them up in the vest, put a little bow tie on them. They'll say, this is my service animal. You're like, no. If somebody tells you that, they're not a service animal because they don't know. Right? Now, what screwed it up for everybody are the airlines. Because the airlines operate under a different law. The FAA is jurisdiction over airlines, sadly. But they do. And they have said, airlines have said, okay, we're going to allow comfort animals if you go to a psychologist-type person and you give us a notice that says you have anxiety and you need a dog to fly with you. So now you see dogs on every flight. How many of you see that? And we're not just talking about little bitty dogs. That guy got on the plane the other day with a full-size boxer, and it had a little vest on, like I'm a guide animal. And I wanted to say, dude, not a guy. And you're seeing the airlines start to push back. Delta changed their policy. Southwest started to change their policy, right? Because it's just not fair to everybody else. How many of you have allergies to pet dander? Anybody? Yeah, it's just not fair to everybody. And you can take a Valium for crying out loud, right? I'm not trying to be insensitive, just trying to be funny. But my point is, you've got to realize that those animals, comfort animals and emotional support animals, are not allowed in restaurants or in hotels. If you have a pet policy, everybody comes in, right? We're pet friendly, bring it on. But if you don't, if you've got a zero pet tolerance policy, they don't come in unless they are what? A qualified animal. How do you know if they're qualified? You can ask two questions of the guest. You can say, do you have a disability that this pet assists you with? And if they answer yes, then you can ask, what type of assistance do they provide? But that's it. You can't ask them anything else under the law. And if they say yes, and then they tell you, they help me with seeing, or they help me with hearing, or they alert me if there's an emergency, then yes. Would you please close your laptop, please, ma'am? Then yes. Then you let them in. Even if you have a no pet policy, they come in. What if you have a pet deposit policy? You waive it. They don't pay. Now, can the pet run wild? No, the pet still, it can't become a nuisance. It can't disturb other guests. Right? So, you have to realize that we're kind of stuck right now in relying on people's honesty, which means we're really stuck right now. But this is not the time to be the sheriff. If somebody comes in and lies about it, just let them in, right? Save yourself the time, energy, and angst. And before the class is over, I will give you a link to an exceptional resource that's totally free that you can call or look on their website and get answers to almost every ADA question you ever thought could arise. It's supported by your tax dollars, and it's a fabulous organization made up of people with disabilities. It's really, really a terrific organization. Yes, sir. Yeah.
So, Dr. Barth, you're saying even if it's not a dog or a miniature horse, you still let them in anyway?
Hold on. Just 1 second.
Okay.
It's a great question. I want to be absolutely clear about that. I'm saying no. If it's a hotel or a restaurant, if it's a qualified animal, it has to be a dog or a horse. No other animal qualifies. So the deal is off from the get-go. It's also off if the dog or miniature horse is described as an emotional support animal or a comfort animal, except on airplanes. Does that help? Clarify. Now, one last thing while I go. If they're qualified for everything. The room, the food and beverage area, the swimming pool, the lobby, everywhere. They get to go everywhere their person goes. Okay.
I think right now there's a big deal for veterans with PTSD to get emotional support.
Uh-huh.
Is that basically that's a whole different scenario?
It's different. But it's still not covered as a qualified service animal under the ADA. And until Congress does something differently, right? They don't qualify. Now, if a hotelier called me and said, hey, I've got a service member here, a veteran here, who is traveling with an animal as emotional support, and I know it's not qualified under the ADA, but can I let them in anyway and not screw up the rest of my set of precedent for everybody else? I'm going to say, absolutely, let them in, right? Charge a pet deposit if you want to, because that's not in violation of the ADA, but it's the right thing to do. It's just like if you have a policy at your hotel that says we don't admit people under 21, but how old do you have to be to join the service? 18. So they're traveling across country at 19. We're saying you're qualified to go to war, but you're not qualified to stay in my hotel? I got this. I would encourage them to make an exception to their rule then as well, if that makes sense. Yeah, somebody had their hand up. Yes, sir. Stephanie, did you have your hand up? No.
Do cruise ships fall under the same?
No, cruise ships, it depends on where their home port is. That's why you rarely have any cruise ships licensed in the United States, because they don't want to follow U.S. labor law. Yeah, they don't want to follow Canadian labor law either, or French.
I went to a music festival on a cruise ship that left out of Florida, and there was like an emotional support dog that went to the music festival. And it was wearing like little earmuffs to avoid
Yeah, yeah. Hey, listen, I actually like that.
It was pretty cool.
See, I personally think people that smoke around their pets should go to jail. So I'm like it. If you take the dog, you should think about their hearing, right?
It was cool to have the dog like at a concert.
I missed that. I didn't get the laugh. Tell me again. The dog.
The dog was like at a concert, just like in the front row. Like,
Yeah. All right. Cool. I'm glad to see you guys laugh again. That was good. All right. And you knew it was coming. That's good.
I had no idea like why, like how the dog got on. I wasn't sure what the policy for like a cruise line was for that.
And they all have their own, because the international jurisdiction is kind of depends on where your flag is registered. Yeah. And I can guarantee you most cruise ships register their ships in the least onerous territories for labor and or environmental requirements. But then you get territorial water issues. And it's the same thing with airlines. We've got treaties that cover all this stuff. So it's It's interesting. Okay, one other thing I want to make sure we talk about regarding the ADA. The word is? Thank you. Notice. So, when you're in your reading, did you find out a trend that's going on today under the ADA? Strike that. Where is everybody making hotel reservations today? Online. Do websites need to be disabled friendly? Okay. And so what happened when the ADA first got passed is you had some attorneys that were disabled. And they became very vigilant about bringing litigation against hotels and restaurants and movie theaters, what we call places of public accommodation, right? To force them to comply with the law. What would happen is these people would not even stay at the hotel. They would just make a reservation. They would go and find a technical non-compliance issue. The slope is 1 inch too low, right? There's an impediment in the ramp. The door doesn't open like it's supposed to. The parking spaces are not for the disabled are not wide enough. The bathroom is a ½ inch off. Those types of things. And then they'd immediately file a lawsuit. And then they'd say, look, we'll settle this for $15,000. Not caring whether or not the building was brought up to code, just to get the legal fees. And we started calling those drive-by lawsuits. Because they wouldn't even stay. They'd go, they'd check in, they'd look, they'd measure everything, they'd do it, then they'd leave, and then the next day you'd get the demand letter from the law office, right? So one judge, in his opinion, wrote that this is extortion. So why would you settle cases like that? If you were the hotelier, why would you pay $15,000 to walk away? Well, you don't want bad press, but also if you go to trial on a case like that, it's probably going to cost you $50,000 in legal fees. And you might lose. So often, and you don't have insurance for these cases. So often it's cheaper to pay that money than it is to litigate, right? Now, the problem with that is what? If you don't repair it, what could happen? It could happen again the next week, the next person. They all have the right to sue under the Act. Now what's happened is that a lot of places are working hard to comply. And a lot of architects and designers, they understand the Act better now. But you're still seeing some of those lawsuits. So that business is drying up a little bit for the lawyers. So what are they suing for now? I asked you where reservations are made. Yeah, they're suing because the websites don't comply with the ADA. So now they don't even have to leave the comfort of their home. They just log in and go, that's it, right? Here's a lawsuit. And look, I'm all for compliance and I'm all for accountability. But we need to think about fairness and effectiveness. Now, the reason I asked Camille to write down the word notice is because for the last 25 years, since these lawsuits have been prevalent, the business community have argued vociferously to give us at least 90 days notice so that we can remedy before we're liable for attorney's fees or damages. Right? On its face, does that seem reasonable? But if you were a disabled person, what is your perspective about that? Why? You know what the law is. It's clear. If I give you 90 days notice, what are the odds that you're going to fix it before you get the 90 days notice? That's the challenge, and that's why the disabled community has been so successful in lobbying Congress to not provide that notice provision. So it's the yin and the yang, two sides to every story. You have to be aware and understand what's going on out there. All right, so I'm looking forward to seeing these and reading them. I'll get them graded. I try to get things back in a week, although that's a lot. I'll see what I can do. And we're not going anywhere. Hold on, everybody, simmer down, sit tight. We got a whole other chapter to talk about. I'm just getting started here. Come on. All right, so that's the Americans with Disabilities Act. There's a whole lot more to the act. When we talk from Chapter 7, for instance, and Chapter 8, we're going to talk about Title I, which has to deal with hiring people with disabilities and accommodating them. All right? All right, so let's get recharged here. I'm a little light today. Now, Chapter 6, we've talked about intellectual property. You're going to learn more about intellectual property. We're going to focus the rest of the class this morning on the fundamentals of property, and then talk about the financing aspects of property, and then we'll talk about leasing. It looks like we'll probably get to that on Thursday. Now, what types of property are out there? Who wants to tell me? Gunner?
Real property.
Real property and? Personal property. Very good. Somebody give me an example. Queenie, give me an example of real property. Land is a perfect example of real property. Arista, give me an example of personal property. A table. Point personal property out in this room for me. The chair is a great example. Somebody point out a fixture. Can I remove the lights? I can remove the lights. When I remove it, will it cause damage to the ceiling? It'll just leave a hole in it, right? Won't cause damage. Can I take that with me? Personal property. A fixture is something that's permanently attached. That if you remove it, these are look like they're attached, but if you took out 2 bolts, you're probably going to walk off with the table. Right? So here's the but would it leave holes in the floor? Would that leave holes in the ceiling? Right. This is why we argue in the law about real estate, personal property, and fixtures. This is why when you buy a house or a restaurant, you need to make sure it's clear what's staying with the house, what's staying with the restaurant, or if you're selling, what you're taking with you. Mirrors that are hanging on the wall. Personal property or a fixture? Personal. What if the device that it's holding up to is big and large, and when you take it off, it leaves a big unpainted hole there? My point is, it's hard to know, and the law is hazy. So the point I want you to walk away with is, yes, you need to know the difference between real estate and personal property for a reason I'll get into in just a second. But you also need to understand what a fixture is, because you will be dealing with landlords. And you need to realize, what is it I get to take? What is it that I'm buying when I'm buying something? Right? The last thing you want to do is pay $100,000 for a restaurant that's going out of business, and the guy says, I'm going to sell you all the furniture, right? And you think that means everything in the place, and the $10,000 hood is not there when you show up to take over because they took it out. You're like, hey, wait, I thought you were selling me all the furniture. He goes, yeah, but I didn't say, I didn't say the hood. That's not furniture. You said, but it's a fixture. Well, not anymore. I got it out, didn't I? So you've got to identify personal property, fixtures, real property. Okay? All right, now, that becomes important if something is personal or real property, because we have different ways of financing and selling real property and personal property. What legal documents do we use to transfer title to real property? What's it called? A deed. We call it a deed. What do we call the document to transfer ownership of personal property? A bill of sale. And all it is a piece of paper that that you describe what the property is, how much you're selling it for, and that's it. A deed is different. A deed describes the real property through what's known as, in the United States, what's known as a meets and bounds system. And it's done through a survey. And that's how we establish title to real estate in the United States. Now, real property is valuable. And if you buy real estate, what do you want to make sure you get? Tell me. Well, ROI is important for sure, but if you're buying a house, you're not necessarily looking for an ROI. I guess some people are, it's fair. But the first thing you want to make sure you get when you pay the money for real estate, what do you want to make sure you get? The deed, which evidences what? The title, the ownership, the title to that property. You want to make sure that that title is clear and that nobody else has a claim to it. So that's why you typically get what's known as a warranty deed. A warranty deed, if I sell something to Patrick, a warranty deed says, Patrick, I'm not only selling you this land, but I'm guaranteeing to you, and I will defend I guarantee you that I own it and nobody else has a valid claim to it, and I will defend it for the rest of time. That's a hell of a guarantee. And you need to realize you're doing that. Now, in the United States, in most states, except a few like Minnesota, we have what's known as title insurance. So that Patrick, when he buys the real estate, can also buy a title insurance policy. Patrick says, you know, Professor Barth, I like you, but I don't trust you. So I appreciate the guarantee, but I'm going to insure my title, right? So if anybody does claim it and you're not around to defend it, this title insurance policy will pay me if something happens to the title to my land. That's why when you buy a house, you typically buy title insurance to provide you with security that, in fact, you are now the owner, right? And what they do, title insurance companies, is they have lawyers that go back to the very beginning of time. The very first transaction for that real estate. And they track it. And it's done all the way up to the very minute that you buy it to make sure that there's not an adverse claim to your ownership. Okay? Now, when you buy real estate in the United States, you can buy it a couple of different ways. How can we pay for it? We can pay cash. Easiest way. You pay cash. It's done. You get the deed, you pay cash. How else can you buy it? Over time. Right? A loan. You buy it over time. Well, the owner can sell it to me and carry the paper. That's what we say. The owner can self-finance. So if Andrew sells me a piece of property for $100,000, he goes, hey, I'm going to sell this to you. I can't pay you $100 now. He goes, well, how about $10,000 a year for the next 10 years? I go, sure. That sounds great. He said, well, let's make it 11 so there's a little carrying charge, a little interest. I go, sure, why not? So he writes up a promissory note, right, for $100,000 plus some interest, $10,000 a year for each year. I sign it. Are we done? Are we done? What needs to happen? What am I worried about? If Andrew sells it to me, what am I worried about?
Somebody come in and take it from me.
Well, not taking it from me. I'm worried Andrew's going to sell it to somebody else. So all of a sudden, I give Andrew 10, 20, 30 grand. He turns around and sells it to Gabrielle. She gives him 10, 20, or 30 grand. And I finished paying Andrew, and then Gabrielle says, what? Dude, I own this land. You're like, what? No, I paid for this. Here's my checks. Gabrielle says, doesn't matter. You didn't secure your interest in the land. Whoa, what's that mean? Yeah. So, I would take that deed that Andrew gave me, and what would I do with it? I would file it of record. That's how we notice. It's called perfecting your interest in property. Perfection, perfecting. Putting people on notice, another use of the word today, putting people on notice of your claim to the land. So I would take that deed that Andrew gave to me and go file it in the deed records in the county where the land is located. It's at the county clerk's office. Now, when Andrew goes to try to sell the land to Gabrielle, if Gabrielle's intuitive and smart, what's the first thing Gabrielle's going to do before she buys the land? She's going to go check the records, because what did I tell you is the most important thing you wanted if you buy land? The title. So you go check and see if the title is free and clear and available for sale. So Gabrielle says, well, dude, I'd like to buy your land, but it looks like you already sold it 3 years ago to Professor Barth. And Andrew goes, oh, I forgot about that. Right? So you've got to be cautious about that. But that's how we perfect our security interest. We file it of record. I'll give you another example here in just a second. But let's change the facts a little bit. Let's say that Andrew wants to sell the land and Natalie is the bank. So the owner, the seller, the buyer, the financial, their mortgage company, right? I need to borrow $100,000 because Andrew doesn't want to wait for his money, but I don't have the money. So the bank says, look, if you'll put 10% down, we'll loan you $90,000. Why do they want me to put 10% down? Well, the land's going to be the collateral. Why do they want me to put 10% down? Number one, so I've got skin in the game. Right? And number two, if they have to take the property back immediately, they've got a little cushion on what it's worth so they can get their money back that they loaned against the value of the property. Do you see that? That was fast. Now, so Natalie says, we're going to loan you this money. So we go to close. You do a closing, typically at a title company. The documents are all there. I give Andrew how much? $10,000, because that's my down payment. What's Natalie sending over? $90,000, right? That money's going to be wired into the title company. So Andrew's walking away with how much? $100,000. He got his money. He doesn't care where it comes from, as long as he gets the money, right? So Natalie is relying on the title company to make sure that it's protected. Natalie now has a what? I have the deed to the land now, right? I own it subject to what? Subject to the loan, right? But what keeps me from selling the land to somebody? I go to Rachel, I go, hey, Rachel, I got some land here. I'm going to sell it. I only got $10,000 in it, right? But I'm not a very nice person. I know I signed the note to Natalie, a promissory note to pay back $90,000 over 10 years plus interest, but I don't care about that. So I'm going to take that deed that Andrew gave me, and I'm going to say, Rachel, you want to buy this piece of land for $50,000? Rachel goes, that sounds too good to be true. I know, you got to make up your mind by today. And Rachel goes, sure, I'll buy it. So Rachel buys it. She gives me $50,000. Sounds like fraud, right? It is fraud. But who's got the $50,000? I do. Now you got to get it back from me. I probably already spent it, right? But here's what's going to happen. Rachel's going to make a claim for the land, right? She's going to go work it, own it, maybe sell it again. All of a sudden, Natalie's going to look up and go, wait, we have a loan against that land. Right? But if they didn't do what? If they didn't secure it by filing a notice in the deed records of their lien, what we call a lien, L-I-E-N, or a claim against it, or evidence of the loan, who gets the land? Rachel does. Because if the title company didn't file anything, or the bank didn't file anything to put everybody on notice, Rachel goes down and does her due diligence, and there's nothing there that says there's a loan against it. Rachel buys the land. Is that legal for Rachel to buy the land? Totally legal. And if there's a fight between me and the bank, who wins? The bank. But if there's a fight between Rachel and the bank and they didn't file or perfect their security interest, who wins? Rachel does. Perfecting your security interest is crucial. We'll talk more about that next time when we talk about personal property, and we'll go from there. Keep reading chapter 6. Remember, we're not supposed to be on our mobile devices in class. Just a friendly reminder.